Houston's only classic rock, The Eagle. I'm Doug O'Brien. In my studio, I have Randy Jackson of Zebra. First, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
How's the tour going so far?
It's going good. We played in Austin last night. We actually premiered 3 of the new songs from the new record, and people seem to like them. So
I was going to ask you about that. We'll get to that.
Okay.
That's a good tease, though.
Yeah.
A good way to start.
Yeah.
So it's your 50th anniversary. Did you ever think that you would get to 50 years of doing this?
not when you're starting out.
Right.
Absolutely not. You're not thinking 50 years ahead, and it doesn't even seem like 50 years. Of course, you always hear that from your grandparents or whoever you were when you were younger, that you look it but you don't feel it. But 50 years is a long time, and it's amazing that it's the same 3 original members. That's
Right.
the one thing that.
Well, let's talk about that. How did you come up with the name? Let's talk about that story.
Yeah.
So, first of all, you guys were in other bands before you got into Zebra, right? If my
Right,
research
sure.
is right, you were in Shepherd's Bush,
Right.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then Maelstrom,
Maelstrom,
which
yeah.
actually that's kind of a cool name. I like that one.
Yeah, well.
But how did you come up with Zebra? What's the story there?
Well, we had a gig. Maelstrom was 4-piece, and the keyboard player left because we started playing dance music, and he wanted to just play progressive rock.
Right.
And we couldn't play the progressive rock and get gigs at dances.
Right.
So we had to learn some. We were still playing rock, but we were doing like David Bowie and actually some ZZ Top and some stuff people could dance to.
Right.
Instead of Yes and whatever else we were doing. And
So not a lot of people dancing to Yes.
No.
No. Okay.
no,
All
or,
right.
or Jethro Tull. They wanted to, So, so we met, the 3 of us. We had a gig, actually a girl that, make a long story longer, a friend of mine from school had a dance, and their band had canceled at the last minute. They had a sorority dance, and they were desperate to get a band. They had like 4 days, and she knew that I, had put a band together, and she said, is there any way you guys can do it? And I said, talk to Felix and Guy, and we were just about ready. So, we met at a bar uptown New Orleans to decide on what the name was going to be, and all of us brought a whole list of names with us.
Right.
And we sat there and drank and exchanged names, and until we just couldn't make a decision.
Real quick, do you remember any of the bad ones that you didn't choose?
I could tell you some names later on that not those, not at that time. No,
Okay.
that was too long ago. I remember there was a name for a band called Tragic Dancer.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, it was funny because I learned that a lot of bands would get great names from horse races. The horses had some great
True.
names, and that you could find some pretty cool names in the horses. But but we were sitting there, couldn't decide on a name, and there was a Vogue magazine cover on the wall above where we were sitting, and it was a picture of a woman riding a zebra. It was from 1926, and most people have probably seen this thing. It's pretty famous, and we, as we were leaving, we said, let's just call it Zebra, and that was it.
Nice, simple, one word, and that works.
Yep.
Well, your story reminds me, you're talking about getting the dance with a sorority, that I've always been told in this business of radio, your best ability is availability. And that it sounds like the same with you guys in the beginning.
Yeah, we were ready, and we were just, we just didn't know what the first gig was going to be, and that just happened to be it. So it kind of forced us to get put up or shut up with
That
a name.
pressure, the pressure does it, right?
Yeah.
Now, are you familiar? I found out when I was researching this that there's a Yugoslavian band by the name of Zebra. They put out one album back in the early 70s. Have you ever heard of them?
No, I knew there was a Canadian band that spelled it with 2 Z's.
Okay.
And they came before us, but they were a jazz band, I think.
Okay.
But we found all this out afterwards, and there's been several Zebras since then. Reggae bands called Zebra and
Interesting.
a bunch of different stuff.
You're the most successful so far, so no worries. So let's talk about the debut album. When you're putting that together, what was it like writing it? Did you know you had something when you put that debut album together back in '83, or did you guys just did what you did?
Well, we kind of knew that the songs were good because we'd been getting airplay already with it.
Okay.
Before we even got a record deal. and we had a huge following in New York, and down here too, in Houston and New Orleans, and things were going good. We couldn't get a record deal with the demos of those songs, but we had a radio station up in New York that started put it in regular rotation, and they were like the top requested songs at the station. And eventually, that's how we got our record deal. So it was those songs that ended up on the first record, and we had been playing, a lot of them for at least 5-6 years, maybe even 8 years at that point. And so the fans had already kind of told us which ones they liked, and we had culled the rest, and. So it wasn't. We knew we had some. It was just a matter of whether it was going to reach more than just the initial fans that we had.
So you're from New Orleans, and that's where the band got its start, right? Mm-hmm. You've since been inducted into the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame, but you've also been inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame. So is that how because that's quite a stretch.
Yeah.
Is that how that Long Island connection happened? Is just a DJ at a radio station or a program director said, hey, we like this song and started playing it?
You mean, how did we get to New York?
Yeah, how did that?
No, we were in New Orleans playing the first 2 years together, and we had been watching the other local bands, growing up before us, and a lot of them were great, and they, had great music and stuff, and a couple of them even had record deals. But the one thing they never did, they never left the area, and we would always see them rise to a certain point, and they'd either just sit there or come down, and we said, we got to get out of here, because we were doing great, but you can only do it for so long, I mean,
right. New Orleans only has a ceiling, just like Houston. You can be a huge band in Houston, but if you want to go national or international, you got to go where those makers are, where they can get you there.
Right, and I don't think there were too many record companies going to New Orleans looking for rock bands at the time. So we were either going to go to Los Angeles or New York, and we happened to know a friend of ours from New York. His father actually owned the bakery in New Orleans, and they had come from Queens, and they had some connections up there. And so we flew a guy down from New York that they knew to come see the band, and he was a club owner, and he booked us in New York, and we ended up playing up there on New Year's Eve of 1976 going into 77. And that was our first gig.
Wow. And so you just stayed? Is that it? You just kind of like piece by piece, it started working out for you?
Yeah, we went up. We were doing great in New Orleans already, and we had saved up a bunch of money. So we went to New York, and of course took a huge cut in pay at that point,
Yeah.
But we got to open up for a lot of the local bands up there that were doing great at the time. There was a band called the Good Rats. Twisted Sister was playing around on the circuit at that point. Another band called Rat Race Choir, who they already had huge crowds, and we would open up for them, and so we got popular pretty quick, And,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it really worked out well for us in that respect, and so we eventually ran out of money, and we went back to New Orleans. I think it was in March, April, something like that, and we did a little run in New Orleans and saved some more money. We went back up to New York. And at the end of the summer, by the end of the summer, we were making enough money. We didn't have to go anywhere at that point. We could stay in New York. And so
I can say from my own personal experience, because I worked in New York for a period of time.
Oh, okay.
Save up money before you go, because it is expensive and it is difficult to get enough work to make enough money to survive. So getting that bank is always a good idea.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can make good money, but you gotta be prepared.
Yeah, because you're going to spend it.
Yeah.
I saw, just a side note on TikTok, somebody showed an apartment in New York. Now, when I was there, it's been almost 25 years since I was up there. And I had a regular apartment, 700 square feet, but it was $2,100 on the Upper East Side. They were showing the apartment was smaller than the studio we're in right now. And it was like $1,500, and they had a community bathroom.
Yeah.
It was, it looked worse than jail. I mean, other than getting, shanked or shivved, like that still may happen. It's New York, but yeah, it is not for the faint of heart.
No, it's very surprising, and it's like you're living in Escape from New York, but you're paying for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So did you ever make it out to L.A. At any point other than touring, or did you mostly concentrate your business in New York?
We we didn't get a record deal. We had several managers who had connections with record companies up in New York, but everybody said you're too dated, you know.
Really?
Yeah.
Even then?
Even then, yeah.
Wow.
It was like late 70s, and they said if you'd have come around 10 years ago, you know, we would have signed you right away. But, you know, it's kind of...
And what kind of music were you playing? Were you playing the dancey or prog or what?
We were playing the stuff that's on the first record.
Okay. So wait, they were saying you were dated in the late 70s.
Right.
Even though it didn't really hit mainstream until early 80s.
83, yeah.
That just shows, you know, that sounds like record people.
Yeah.
Not to be mean to record people, but they sometimes miss the mark, right? So, I mean, it's a gamble altogether.
Yeah.
So how did it come about? If you weren't getting the traction then and they were claiming that you were dated, and we know the success is coming, how did that happen? How did you get there?
Well, we, like I said, that radio station started playing the music. Now, we did go to Los Angeles in this time. When we didn't get the record deal, we went out to Los Angeles. We've got another manager out there, a guy who actually managed Christine McVie at the time. So he had a lot of connections. And then we left him. He disappeared, you know. And
Really?
yeah, I mean,
Really?
I've seen him a lot since. And yeah, he had a breakdown. You know, his parents had just died. He had a lot of emotional issues, but nobody knew where he was. Christine didn't know. We asked everybody, you know, what happened to Jim? His name was Jim Recor, you know, great guy, but he just disappeared off the face of the earth, and we were living in his house, you know, and so we just locked it up and went back to New York to do some gigs, you know.
Hey, keys under the mat.
Yeah,
See you later.
Well, yeah, you know, if you come back, yeah, it was strange, but we got back to New York. And Bob Buckman, who was a program director up there at WBAB, was playing the music in, you know, heavy rotation.
Yeah.
And he had a guy named Jason Flom from Atlantic who had just started out. He was like a teenager at that time. And he was out trying to get them to play a new record from Atlantic at the station and doing promotional stuff. He would, you know, do promo stuff in record stores and stuff like that. And he went to Bob to talk about this, and Bob, in the meeting with him, said, listen, you know, you guys should check out this band Zebra, you know, and showed him all the information about, you know, the requests and that kind of stuff. So Jason went, wow, was this for real? He says, yeah. And so he took it back to Atlantic, and we had been shopped at Atlantic, but there was a different president at the time. So there was a brand new president named Doug Morris, and he, you know, I learned years later that this was really kind of how it happened. Was Jason gave Doug, the president, the tape, and Doug was going to listen to it on the way home, and he did. He put it in his car, and he put the thing, you know, his car service, and there was a radio in there, old tape deck, and he starts, and the first song on the tape is "Who's Behind the Door," which has like a minute and a half, you know, acoustic guitar intro. You know, you're not getting to the hook very quick there. And after about 30 seconds, he just ejected it. You know, he was like, you know, it's just going to be one of these things. But when he ejected it, the radio station happened to be tuned to WBAB, and they were playing the song.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he was kind of like,
the timing of it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it took, let's just put it this way, it took a lot for us to get the record deal. Yeah.
So what was it like once you got the deal, your songs are doing well, the album, it went gold. What was it like with the second album? Because, you know, the old saying that you have your lifetime to make your first album, and then you have, 6 months to make your second album. How difficult was that? Like, what was the response there?
Well, I mean, it was difficult because I really wasn't prepared. I mean, we got a record deal. It's great. We went, you know, on tour, having a great time, just kind of continuing what we had been doing, which was playing the clubs in the, you know, the 80s. And just, even though it wasn't clubs, we were still partying like it was. And then, you know, it came time for the record. We had music, you know, but we certainly didn't have the amount, you know, that they had for the first record. So I was kind of scrambling, going back through my tapes and stuff and putting songs together. And we did, and we got the record together, but it was tough. And So it was actually, but at the time I stopped drinking and doing everything at that point because
Right.
I wanted to get ready for the third record. And it takes time to party like that.
Sounds like a rock and roll story there, a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk real quick for people who don't understand. When you put out a record, and let's say it's got 10, 12 songs on it, how many songs do you have to be able to get down to those 10? Because you don't just walk in with 10 songs and go, oh, here it is, let's just record it.
Yeah.
How many songs do you start with?
I mean, at least 30,
Okay.
and I would usually have around 50,
Wow.
that either I had presented to the band or that I had culled from and then present the best of what I had to the band,
Right.
and see what they wanted to do. But yeah, I mean, we're not the Beatles. The Beatles
Right.
could write anything,
Yeah.
and it would be a hit. But through quantity comes quality. It was my motto. So that's about what we had to do. I mean,
Well, you took a little break, went and did a side project, a little solo project called Randy Jackson's China Rain. What was that like? Did you enjoy doing your solo thing, or did you prefer Zebra, or are they just two different animals?
well, I mean,
No pun intended.
Yeah, it came out of the blue. I mean, Atlantic had already dropped Zebra in 1986, and then I got a call from Jason Flom, the guy who had originally signed us, and he said that Doug Morris wanted to know what I was doing, and he wanted me to do a solo record. And I said, why don't we just do another Zebra record? And he says, no, Doug wants you to do a solo record. So I said, oh, okay. But we kept Zebra. We wasn't like I was leaving the band or anything.
Right.
I was just doing a side project. And then what it entailed was I started writing with other people. So I
Okay.
got to meet a bunch of different people and write with them along the way. And that was a great experience, because you'd have to really, I couldn't write like I was used to writing, a little piece here and then 2 weeks later another
Right.
little piece and whatever. You had to really knock it out in one day, So I wrote with a bunch of different people, and it was a good experience. I did a couple of songs with Mark Slaughter, the guys from Skid Row.
Okay.
I wrote with Paul Stanley, a guy named Mark Mangold who had written a bunch of hit songs, and it was just a good experience to get, to be able to do that with these different people. So I got a lot out of that. Unfortunately, we had Nirvana come in and just change the whole music scene. And my album was
Yeah.
like an 80s rock album, and Atlantic just decided to not even try.
Well, you
because-
are not alone in that one, because
No.
there were a lot of 80s bands that were just like, top of the charts. I mean, you can ask Poison, Crew, all of them. The Twisted Sister, like, okay, see you guys. Thanks for the decade. We'll see you later.
Yeah, that's
So
pretty much what happened, yeah.
let's talk about Cobra Kai. And let's talk about, I just want to know, because I know you know the story of how it all happened. For people who don't, William Zabka, who plays Johnny Lawrence, he was a big fan of Zebra. So when he was preparing to audition for Karate Kid originally, he was listening to the tape, and he had on the Zebra shirt, and that's what he auditioned in, and it wound up in Cobra Kai as well. What was it like for you? Did you see the episode, or did you find out after the fact when people called you and texted you?
No, they were sending me photos of
Right.
their TV, and that's what I was seeing. Of course, I was very familiar with William Zabka, and I had kind of heard about the show, but I hadn't seen it yet,
Right.
But I was surprised about the whole story and how it all came about. I thought it was
Yeah.
kind of cool that he wore the shirt and everything, and
You just never know who's a fan.
you never know.
And that's the amazing part. So did you see a resurgence? Did you see more bookings and touring? Or
Well, we were selling a lot more of those shirts, I can tell you.
It never hurts merch, right? Never.
No, never hurts the merch,
So, and I read you got a special gift from one of the Simpsons artists. What's that?
Well, it was one of the cartoonists for The Simpsons, one of the lead artists, and he drew a big Zebra fan, drew a sketch of the whole Simpsons family, and they're holding the Zebra record, and they're talking about Zebra in the little cartoon thing, and it's he had it framed and everything. And it was nice.
That's
it was
very
flattering.
cool.
Yeah.
Because Simpsons are really, for this last 20, 25 years, has been a marker of cultural icons and just cultural moments. So that's pretty cool.
It was cool.
Now, how would, for people who know nothing about Zebra, all right, so we've already talked about the height in the 80s. How would you describe Zebra? How is it different than, say, the other bands at the time, like Def Leppard or Crew or Twisted Sister, even Ozzy? I mean, hell, you even had Billy Idol and Journey at that time popping. How was Zebra different than those bands?
I would say that we weren't like a hair band. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
And just we didn't come off like that, and the music wasn't really like that. I'd say our music was more. It was a little earlier.
Okay.
We were more influenced by early '70s.
Like Zeppelin?
Bad Company. It was more that kind of rock as opposed to, like you said, Poison and whatever else was coming out,
Poison and all of those were a little more pop rock.
Pop rock, yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like all of your roots are, like you mentioned earlier, in prog rock and more the hard rock, so that kind of gives it a different edge.
Yeah, and that was what it was. I never really thought of us as a prog band, but evidently a lot of people that were listening did, and I was like, okay, well, because I wasn't trying to write prog stuff,
right?
But I guess it just kind of some of it came across that way.
It's always amazing, though, the influences, how they kind of seep in to your musical stylings over the years.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned earlier about the new album, so I read the new album is in the works, or is the new album out?
It's not out.
Okay.
But it's coming out.
When will it be out?
Well, we're going to do it a little piece by piece.
Okay.
And we're supposed to have like 2 or 3 songs released in May, and every month we're going to just keep adding to it until we get to September. We've got a whole bunch that's just almost ready to be mixed, Now,
do you still, this is, I thought about this because the industry is different for people who don't know. Used to, guys would go to the radio station with a record, and then radio stations would either play it or don't. It's not quite like that anymore, and now it's not even like that with the public. It's all streaming. And I mean, really, you don't see albums or album art anymore. It's just songs get released, right?
Yeah.
So is that part of that process? Is that you release songs because of the streaming, or is it just a way to kind of just give everybody a taste?
Well, I mean, I think, when I think about people who release a whole record and put out a single at the time, and then all of a sudden, if the single doesn't hit, they might put out one more or something, but it's over.
Right.
And so, like, this way, you're picking songs and you're just releasing them as you go along. And I think it's kind of better for the artist, because it gives the fans, the hardcore fans, a chance to, digest each song or group of songs as you go along and have something to look forward to. As it goes along. That's the way it was explained to me. I said, that kind of makes sense to me,
It sounds kind of like a drug deal. You give them a taste, get them wanting more. That's what a friend told me. I'm not saying I know this, but no, you're right. Keep them hungry, right? You give them a little taste, you keep them hungry.
Yeah.
So I've also read there's a documentary about your 50th anniversary tour. Is that correct?
Or
it's
a documentary about the band. It's like the second one we've done, but it's going to cover a bunch of territory that we didn't hit at all. With the first one, and we've been working on it. We've got interviews with people who were with us in the very, very beginning with some great stories, and plus a lot of footage that's never been seen before.
Now, when might we see that?
It's going to definitely be later this year or early next year.
Okay.
It's not going to happen immediately. Right now, we're just focused on getting the record out,
Well, that is awesome. I saw you guys last year when you played at House of Blues, and it was absolutely fantastic. I think I even came on stage and introduced you guys.
Okay.
I can't remember. A year ago, at our ages, a year ago is a long time ago. But you guys are playing tonight, House of Blues. If you want tickets, just give House of Blues a call. We have information on our website, Houston'sEagle.com. Randy Jackson, Zebra, thank you so much for stopping by, and this has just been a blast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.